full-blown AIDS?
Well, that's important too, and we made this point very early on in the early epidemiology. It was only a very small percentage of people would appear to be getting ill at that time. And then as the disease progressed, I mean, the epidemic progressed through sort of 86, 87, it transpired that the majority of people, when we could identify who had the virus on board and who didn't, and we could follow them for a few years, the majority of people were getting ill, so it was revised. And then some, I think, were fairly bold accusations were made that everybody who's got the virus is going to get ill. And I mean, there's very few viral infections where you can be sure that everybody who contracts it's going to manifest all the symptoms. We know that from all the cardinal garden viruses. And then it was clear that there were some people who we could track back sort of way before we knew about AIDS, as it were. We could see their blood was infected for 10 years, that they were quite well 10 years later, that there was a small percentage of people who don't seem to be getting ill.
Now, before we go to Professor Duisberg, who's in Berlin at the moment, would you say, therefore, that Professor Duisberg was misguided? I mean, he undoubtedly has a fairly firm academic track record. You're not suggesting that he's unethical or anything like that. Are you suggesting that he's dangerous?
I'm suggesting that, I mean, that everyone in the field appreciates what Professor Duisberg did for the molecular biology, but I think what he's doing for this field is saying that the AIDS isn't caused by the HIV virus, when it clearly is. And the data, anybody who wants to look for it, went to a court jury, there was just absolutely no doubt at all that the virus causes the disease. He has mentioned several points about it. If we could only get away from the fact that he says the virus doesn't cause the disease, he has mentioned several points which are of great interest, and Professor Montagnier has picked up on them. We're not quite sure how the virus is causing the disease and what else is required to make it occur quickly in certain people, and why some people don't get it so quickly.
Would you say, though, in a word, does that present a danger to the public?
I think it presents a tremendous danger if people are going to get a message out there that the virus doesn't cause AIDS and it's due to something else, and if they're not intravenous drug abusers, then they're absolutely at no risk.
Let's go now to Professor Peter Duisberg, who's in Berlin. Professor Duisberg, we've got Professor Dalgleish here saying that you actually do present a danger to people.
Yes, that's what he feels, and that's what many feel. Well, I think I could return the compliment, unfortunately. I think the orthodoxy is the danger to the people. The orthodoxy hasn't saved one life with the virus hypothesis, hasn't provided a vaccine, hasn't provided a drug, has not even predicted how AIDS is going to spread, that it would not spread into the heterosexual population, exactly as they had predicted, that they couldn't come up with a vaccine. So, in fact, what's even worse than that, they have come up with the so-called antiviral drug, AZT, which is known to be extremely toxic. It is by far the most toxic drug that has ever been approved for long-term consumption in anybody in the Western world. It was initially developed solely to kill human cells for chemotherapy, and is now used as an antiviral drug.
Professor Duisberg, let's just move away from AZT just for one moment and concentrate on, for example, the introduction of screening, the introduction of massive campaigns for safe sex. Are you saying that that sort of procedure has not saved a single life?
There is no evidence that the safe sex campaign has saved one single life. AIDS continues to increase despite the safe sex campaigns. You could, of course, make a hypothesis and say it would have increased even further, but there is no evidence for that, none whatsoever. Heterosexuals do not get AIDS. Prostitutes do not get AIDS, at least not nobody in the Western world, that is in US and in Europe.
OK, Professor Duisberg, thank you very much for joining us. What would you say to that, Professor Duisberg? They're merely reiterating the message we heard in that film.
It totally reiterates and says that continually he keeps saying there's no evidence. There is absolutely litany of evidence. He either can't read it or he can't understand it when he sees it, and I really have to be that blunt about it. I mean, you cannot say that and expect to get away with it.
Professor Dalgleish, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, that's where we'll take a break. In a moment, the young mother trying to get back her son from the father who snatched him.